As Anna mentioned, but some of you might have missed because you were not here yet, Anna Aranda is the project manager of Aquaserve, and I'm the access officer or transnational access manager, if that's a title that makes more sense. And we will be talking about the transnational access program within Aquaserve today. Since you made your way to this info session, I'm sure you've heard or read at least a little bit about this, but we'll go through the most important things to know about the application process and about the TA program in general. I will try to keep this as brief as possible so that we have time for questions, because I think that's really the main thing we should seize, the fact that we're all here and we can talk about more specific questions. Also, some of you submitted questions beforehand. At the end of this, if I haven't replied to your question through this presentation, please ask it again. And otherwise, we will get to all the written questions afterwards as well. All right, so right from the start, we will set the scene with a video that was prepared by the communications team in Aquaserve at CCMR. And many thanks to Anais Guerra, who's behind this video, and also the voice. You should be able to hear it. If you don't, then please let me know straight away. Okay.
Imagine accessing Europe's leading research facilities and instrumentation with funded travel, accommodation, and experimentation. All to advance research in sustainable aquaculture, fisheries, ecological restoration, or the blue economy. This is what Aquaserve offers you. With over 600 scientific services in 60 state-of-the-art research facilities across 16 European countries, Aquaserve provides funded access to research facilities, free access to biodiversity, food and fisheries databases, and training opportunities. This will allow you to address major societal challenges, upscale your research, and actively contribute to European policies. Take the opportunity. Researchers worldwide from academia, industry, and policy can apply. We are waiting for you.
Okay, so this gave us a nice introduction really to what the TA program is largely about, and Aquaserve as a project. And there are, within the overall project, there are different kinds of opportunities and different kinds of access to resources that are available to external users. And here in this slide, you have a quick overview of that. So the first point here is the funded access, and that's what we will be talking about today. So when I say transnational access, I'm talking about funded access. That's kind of synonymous in our context here. But just to briefly touch upon the other two points here, we also have a virtual access program or offer. And the main, or one of the main differences between these two, the funded and the virtual access, is that the virtual access, as the name suggests, allows you to access data or databases and online resources from your computer online via links. And here you don't have an application process. There's no selection. You get direct access to it through the Aquaserve partners who provide these virtual access. And you can find all the relevant links on the Aquaserve website. Then the third point here is training. There are some training opportunities for within Aquaserve. So if your institution is one of the partners in Aquaserve, then you have even more possibilities. But everyone, regardless from where you are from and whether or not your institution is part of Aquaserve, there is a a whole range and list of trainings that are available to you. And here again, there's a dedicated page about that on Aquaserve. So I would direct you to that and not go further into the training now, because as I said, we are here to talk about DIFF-Net access. On that note, so the Transnational Access Program, or TA program, is really a large program with many partners. So we've got partners in 16 countries across Europe, and there are more than 33 institutions who in total have around 60 stations or facilities, so distinct places where you can go and do research. And then within those 60 stations or facilities, you then have many labs and different kinds of services. We have about or more than 600 services in total. And we can talk about what we mean by service a little bit later. But in a nutshell, that's what you are requesting access to. So it could be, for example, to access mass spectrometry. That would be an example of a service. Okay. Then what the TA program covers is, of course, the access to those services themselves. And that can be on site. So you go and visit the facility and conduct the experiment yourself or analyze the data yourself on site. But it can also be remote. So here an example would be that the facility sends you samples, or that they carry out an experiment for you on site and you receive the data. Some of the services in our catalog are available as both, either or. Some of them are available only on site and some only remote. So that's something that you will see when you apply, and that you will be able to discuss with the access provider directly as well. And it is possible within one TA project to have both on-site and remote services. So you can combine the two as well if that makes the most sense for your experimental design. Another thing that's covered are consumables, but that's within the frame that the access provider has provided at the beginning. So they will have a set of standard consumables that are included in the service. If you need any extra consumables, anything that they don't usually have or don't usually cover, then that will be at your expense. But this is something that is discussed before you even start the project. So there will be no surprises. And then the third thing that's covered is travel and accommodation and meals, if this is on-site access. Here, I put an asterisk to remind myself to mention here that this is it will be within the guidelines of each access provider. So depending on where you go, there might be different internal rules there in terms of how much you can spend per day for meals and how travel reimbursements work, etc. Also, as we go further along in Aquaserve, there may be less travel budget available. We're not at this point yet, but these are just things as well that you will need to discuss with the access provider before you start booking travel and planning your stay. And then here at the bottom left, you see a screenshot from our website, which shows you the top of the service catalog where you have some filters. And we will get into that a bit later, where I really show you how you can look for specific services. But first of all, just to give you an overview of the calls we have within the TA program, there is an open call, which is always open, as the name suggests. So this means you can submit your proposal at any time. However, there are still internal submission deadlines just to make sure that you know by when you can expect a decision, because each proposal will go through several steps of review, checks and reviews. This takes some time. And then every 4 months, we have a user selection panel meeting where all of the applications that have been reviewed in that round are decided upon. And that's always in March, in July, and November. So if you submit your application just before the evaluation meeting in March, then you will not make the March deadline. And so your proposal will be submitted in July. This is something to really look out for, especially if timing is important for your project. And we always have the submission deadlines or recommended submission dates on the website as well. And you see the QR code here, but I think we can put the links in the chat as well. All right, so that was for the open call. Then at the moment, we also have one of our challenge-driven calls. It's currently open until the end of March. And each of these challenge-driven calls are about a specific theme. Whereas the open call is really about all the topics covered in Aquaserve, and I will talk about that in our next slide, The current challenge-driven call that we have open now is about sustainable aquaculture. And here really a keyword that I want to emphasize is sustainable. So we're really looking for projects that focus on that part of this call, on sustainability, new technologies, etc. And when we look at the topics in Aquaserve more broadly, sustainable aquaculture, as we now have the challenge-driven call, is also a topic that's always covered by the open call. But the open call is much broader than that. We also welcome applications on sustainable fisheries or fishery science, blue economy, and ecological restoration. So there are a lot of projects that could fall under these four main themes. It's very broad, really. And then here you see a few keywords that might be relevant to you or not, but it's really it's quite vast. We do have, that's also good to mention actually, we do have access providers that are based at the sea, at the coast, or that have marine, so saltwater tanks and facilities, and we also have freshwater facilities within the network. And one thing that we ask you to specify in the application is how your project speaks to the EU priorities and programs that you see here on this slide. So this is something that you will be asked to expand upon, because this is a EU-funded project which looks to provide excellent science and proof of concept projects and other projects that really further these priorities. So, for example, the European Green Deal or the EU mission on Restore Our Ocean and Waters by 2030. So that's something to keep in mind. And now we really go into the mechanics of the application process. So in the pre-access step, you've decided that you want to apply. The first thing to be aware of is who can apply. So the eligibility criteria are also quite broad, but there are some criteria to look out for. So if you are a PhD student and you have at least a master's degree or an equivalent to a master's degree, could be engineer's degree, then you are eligible to be the main applicant. If you are another early career researcher or a researcher of any other career stage with at least a master's degree, you are eligible. Then you can be a whole co-applicant team. So you can be one person applying, or you can have a co-applicant, or you can have several co-applicants. But just bear in mind that Aquaserve covers the travel and subsistence for up to 2 users. It will cover access to services for more than 2 users, but not the travel and the subsistence per project. Yes, and so another criteria or criterion that you need to be aware of is that you should be affiliated with a bona fide organization. So you need to have an affiliation. We don't mind which kind of contract you have with them. You don't have to be an employee, but you need to have this affiliation. And we also welcome applicants from outside of the EU or Horizon Europe associated countries. And one really important thing to note here is it's called Transnational Access Program because the access to these services has to be transnational. So that means if you are based in country A, you need to go to any of the other countries and access the services there. You cannot stay within country A because that would not be transnational. There's really this element of exchange across borders here. There are some exceptions to this rule, and that is facilities that are part of European research infrastructure consortia like EMBRC and ANAE. I don't want to go too much into detail here because I think we would get lost in the weeds, but the transnational access criterion is important to keep in mind, but also know there are some exceptions, and if you have questions about that, you can ask me. Then these criteria I talked about and some more details, like what happens with master students, for example, they are able to be part of the co-applicant team, but their travel and subsistence will not be covered. Those kind of details are all available on the website. So again, you'll have the link, but there's also a QR code to get you to the page directly. Then once you've checked that you are eligible, it's probably time to look at exactly what service you are applying for. Here there are several scenarios. Either you already know roughly where you want to go, or you know exactly where you want to go because you've been in contact with this institution, or you don't know where to go, but you know exactly what kind of service to look for and what it's called. Or the third scenario is you know what you need for your project, but you don't know how to find that service, how it would be categorized in Aquaserve, etc. So in the first case, it's easy. You can, if you know whom you want to work with, where you want to access services, you can just contact that access provider directly. If you know what service you want to look for, on the next slide, I will show you the search filters on the website that will help you narrow down the partners that have those services. If the third scenario applies to you, where you know, for example, ooh, I want to, I'll go to the mass spec example again. I want to do laser ablation mass spectrometry, but I need it for a very specific thing. I don't know if anyone can do this specific thing. Then that would be the best time to write to me, and I will see if I can find that service for you within the network. Now, to go back to the case where you know roughly what service you would like to access, but you don't know which partners have them. On the next slide, we have a little video which just shows you how you can navigate the search function and the service catalog on the website. So here you're on the service catalog page, and then you see there's a filter for the service category and also for the subcategory, which is a bit more narrow. You can filter by expertise and also by infrastructure and country. So the subcategory is really just a narrower definition of, or that's nested within the categories. And once the video is over, I will talk a little bit more about that just to clarify a few things. Let me go back to this slide actually. Where was it? Here. Yes. Yeah, so the service categories is, as I said, very broad. So if you know you need some sort of fieldwork access, go to this and then see the partners that show up for you within fieldwork access, and then you can take it from there and browse them. If you know a bit more narrowly what you want to access and what it would be called, so for example, you need within the experimental facilities, you need mesocosms. Then you can go straight to subcategory and look for mesocosms. Then filter by country also makes sense. If you know which countries you would like to visit, either because they are your neighboring countries and you want to be mindful of carbon emissions or whatever the reason is, or in the case of ecosystem access, you might need to access a specific ecosystem and climate zone, then you would also filter for country and also to make sure that it's transnational. The other two filters, expertise and infrastructure, will be helpful in very specific cases, but I would not recommend them as the first step to filter something if you're just browsing and looking for services more broadly. One thing I also want to mention here is that, and sorry for browsing through these slides quickly now. One thing I want to mention as well is that there's a handbook or a guide for applicants called Transnational Access Handbook, or TA Handbook, and that is available on our resources page. And this is a long document, a PDF, where you have all of the partners introducing themselves with an overview of their services. The website has the same information, more or less, but within the PDF file, the advantage you have there is that you can just Control F and search for keywords that way. So that is an additional way for you to look for specific things that you want to find. Okay, so once you've identified which services you want to access and where you want to go, this is now the time where you should contact the access provider. And you can find the contacts of the access managers for each of our providers, so partners, on the website. You'll just have to go to the institute page on our website for where the institute you want to visit. And then at the top to the right, you will also always see contact. And this is the person that you can ask. I want to do this, that, and that. I want to do it at your facility. Maybe you already know the time frame when you want to come. Ask them, is this possible? Is this something you can do? And they will guide you through that and let you know what they can do. They can also help you draft your application. And this is highly recommended. Your chance of having a successful application is a lot higher if you work with the access manager. Then to help you draft your application form, we have a template as a Word file on the website, which you can download and then you can work on that offline in your own time. Eventually, you will have to copy and paste what you write into that template into our application system on a site called Aria. So you see that here, and this is Aria. ARIA is the place where you will submit your application and you will be informed via ARIA and also via email of the decision once your application has been evaluated, and everything will be stored centrally there. Now, ARIA can do a lot of things, but it's not the smoothest site always. So there can be some bugs sometimes. At the moment, we're experiencing some server instability there, and therefore it's really recommended that you just work on your draft in the Word file first so that you can copy and paste the answers and so that nothing gets lost. If you run into ARIA problems, you can always reach out to me. I'm not directly responsible for the site, so there's only so much I can do, but it's good for me to be aware of those problems as well. But hopefully everything will go very smoothly for you. Okay. Now you've written your draft and you've submitted your proposal. And then the next thing for you to do is to wait. And this is where the review process starts. And there are several steps that each application will go through, as I already mentioned. The first thing is we will check the eligibility. So this is where we go through the criteria I already showed you and all the criteria available on the website. And if there's an issue here, I will get back to you about that. Then, if the eligibility is fine, then the next thing that happens is that the access provider, so in most cases, the person you've been talking to, will make sure that this application is actually technically feasible. They can host you, they can do this kind of experiment. They might look at dates as well, but dates can always be, should be flexible and can always be changed later. So even if you put a very specific time frame in your application, this can be amended later. So that's not a huge issue, but they will check for all of these things. If they tell us that that is fine, they can host this project, that's where we then send the application to external reviewers, 2 of them, for scientific peer review. And this is the step that might take the longest, obviously, because we want the scientific reviewers to have time to actually go through the application, and we don't want to overwhelm them. And this is the reason why I said that you need to allow some time between your submission and the next evaluation date, which is in March, July, and November each year. And here again, I want to mention that we have suggested or recommended submission dates on the open call page. Then and then as I said, once it's gone through all of these checks and reviews, the user selection panel will meet, look at all the applications, and then based on the scientific review, which they are really looking at as the main criteria, then they will decide which applications are funded. Now, especially as we're moving a bit further into the program, here, once we know in each evaluation round how many applications are being funded and which ones, we will get back to the access provider and say, look, you've had 2 projects funded in this round. Can you please check that you can that you still have budget for both of them? And are there any is there anything that might be a constraint here? Once all of that is done, your application has been granted. You've been selected for funding. Everything's great. Congratulations. Now you'll receive an email from me with the next steps and the requirements. There's some post-project reporting that you will need to do, and all of that will be outlined in the email. Before you start the project, you will be discussing with the access manager and or the people that you will be working with directly on site or remotely. at the access provider, and they will set up a hosting agreement with you. So this is a user contract, more or less, where everything is outlined, the scope of the project, what the funded access entails. If it's an on-site project, it will also detail what the travel reimbursement process is and whether there are any caps to what can be spent on meals, etc., and travel. All of these things, and then the requirements on both sides. All of these things will be outlined and agreed upon by the host and also by your institution. So that's a bilateral document. You will also be asked to set up a data management plan, and instructions on how to do this and what this means will be included in your decision email. Okay, so during the access, if you're a remote user, then we ask you to still take pictures and document the access in whatever form is appropriate. It depends on what your remote access is. But our communications team really ask everyone to provide pictures and think about how they can contribute to the communication side of things. Here as well, you will get more specific asks from our side. Other than that, you might also be asked to give a seminar virtually, or you might not be asked to do that. The remote use is really quite different from the on-site one. You will receive whatever the services are directly, and then once you've received it, you will be asked to do the post-project reporting. If you're an on-site user, then this is not obligatory, in most cases at least, but you are very much encouraged to give a seminar at your host institution to introduce your project and yourself and why you are there. That will also help the exchange and networking side of things. And you will be asked to help the social or the communications team with material. So taking pictures or maybe even videos if you're comfortable doing that. Okay. Then once the TA project is finished, and this might be one part of a larger research project, so we're not asking you to wait until the whole research is wrapped up. But once the access to the service is finished, that's where we consider the TA project to be done. And at that point, we will ask you to submit an activity report within 45 days of completing the project. This is a relatively short report, I would say, with specific sections, and we will send a template to you and also include all of the requirements for this reporting in the acceptance emails. You'll have that. Here is also where you will complete your data management plan that you already set up before the project. And if all of this sounds confusing to you, don't worry, because these are details that you'll receive instructions on when you get to that point. And yes, that was it really. That's the main steps to know about, or those are the main steps to know about, and the gist of how to apply. If you're here mainly because you were attracted by the sustainable aquaculture themed call, so the challenge-driven call we have now, then just keep in mind that the submission deadline for that is on the 31st of March, and the evaluation happens in July. So that's aligned with the open call. If you cannot make that deadline for one reason or the other, you can still submit to the open call later on, but then your application will also be evaluated later on. All right, and if you're here for a different topic and not sustainable aquaculture, you can also submit to the open call at any point. If you do it before the 31st of March, it will be evaluated in July. On that note, I will stop sharing now. I did talk for longer than I intended to. I'm sorry about that, but I hope it was not too slow. And I think we can go to questions now. I will just plug in my computer very quickly. And maybe Anna, if you saw any questions in the chat that or maybe we do show of hands first, whoever wants to speak.
There is already a question in the chat from Anil Talbusher. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but perhaps if you can raise your hand and ask the question live. So Anil?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Yes, I was just wondering, as you just mentioned, if the transnational axis is part of some bigger experimental plan, let's say, how detailed does it have to be in the proposal? Like, do I have to outline everything or only the relevant, the parts that would affect the transnational axis itself?
You don't need to detail anything about that in your proposal, really. The transnational requirement is within the eligibility criteria. So if you are based in, I'll just pick one country, Germany, and you're going to Greece, that's transnational access, and that's it. That's fine. And then let me know if I misunderstood your question, but that's really what that was about. So you don't then need to detail in your written proposal why this is transnational. We just look at, are you moving from one country to the other?
It's more like there is this, if I'm not mistaken, there's one section where it has to be described whether there are any other experiments related to the transnational axis.
Oh, sorry.
Like that. I don't remember the exact wording right now. And as I said, the proposal I'm preparing right now is part of a bigger experiment. Yeah. And the question is how detailed the overall project needs to be outlined.
Okay, sorry for completely misunderstanding your question. Yes, okay. Yeah, you're talking about the actual application form already. Here, the main thing to make sure you convey here is why this is not double funding. So that is really the main thing we're looking for, because sometimes we will receive applications where the TA project is part of, for example, let's say a Marie Skłodowska-Curie funded project, where there's already a lot of funding for several things, and then we don't know, okay, but why do you need more funding? It looks like this is part of your experimental plan already. So should you not already have funding for that? And then they can explain, no, actually, this is not covered because of this or this. And in order for us to avoid, wasting time with going back to you, but why is this not double funding? Make sure you already outline why this is separate from your main research project. Other than that, in the scientific context, so the scientific background section, you can mention how it fits in within the bigger research project, of course, because that might also help the evaluators, the scientific reviewers, evaluate and review the necessity and also the what am I looking for? How what the risk is here and how high the chances are of this being a successful project that really, produces data that will later be used. So all those kind of things, but you don't need to go much into detail about the overall research project.
Okay, thanks. That answers the question.
Good.
Jan?
Yeah, I have several smaller questions, I think. So as how I understood it was that the cost may be covered only partly, so it doesn't have to be the full cost that has to be covered.
So this was just more a word of caution. And here I was talking about, sorry, I hear feedback. Here I was talking about the travel. There's an echo somewhere. The travel and subsistence expenses. If you come from very far, or if you're staying for 3 months, which is the maximum amount of time that anyone can stay or that any TA project can go on for, then it might be that that access provider at that point doesn't have enough travel budget left to fund the whole thing, and then they might have to tell you, look, can we downscale this, etc. Also, there might be internal guidelines because this is a very broad network with lots of different partners, and they are in different countries and they all have their own rules. Some of them will have you pay your travel up front and then they will reimburse you. Others will book the travel for you, and then within their institute, they will have a maximum amount of money that they can spend on travel for one person or per day for meals, etc. So those are just things to ask the specific access provider upfront. And here, this was more of just a heads up so that because if we say travel, everything will be covered, then we might wrongly convey that whatever flight or transport you choose in, or however long you want to stay in whatever hotel, it will always be covered. Yes, it will be covered, but within the guidelines of the institution. I don't know if that clarifies the question, but those are just things that need to be discussed with the access provider beforehand. That's the bottom line. Then for the consumables, here as well, there will be consumables that are, standard consumables that you will always need for equipment or analysis X, Y, Z. This is something that the access manager will tell you about. But then if you want to do any add-on analysis, which might need other kinds of expensive consumables that they don't usually have or that they don't usually work with for the type of analysis that you require access for, that's also something they will let you know about and that you need to discuss beforehand.
Okay, thank you. And one more, maybe short. So if I apply now for the open call till end of March, it will be possible for me, if it all gets checked and confirmed, to go in September to a different institution, right? Because in
Yes.
July it's then settled, basically.
Yes, you will receive the decision by end of July, early August at the very latest. Actually, the access provider will know before you. So I always let them know first, just so that they can tell me if everything is fine on their side still. And at that point, they will be prepared and they will know, okay, Jan will come and access our services. So they can already start preparing on their side. And you will know at the latest end of July, as I said, maybe early August. It will then depend. So in most cases that I've seen so far, September is completely feasible. But I cannot guarantee it because it also depends on whether they already have other people staying, whether they need more time to prepare, what kind of experiment you're doing. Some experiments need like a pre-project preparation phase on their end. So all of those things are, it's the kind of answer I have to give in those cases, which is it depends on the access provider and something you need to check with them. So when you're preparing your application, just let them know, I would really need to do this in September. Do you think it's feasible, given that we will have the answer in July?
Thank you.
You have Matteo. Can you give us an idea of the maximum budget for travel service costs? Is it possible to access one institute on site and another one remotely?
Yes, so to the second part first, yes, it is. So you can absolutely apply for different services within one project and also add different access providers in different countries. That if it goes to the same research project, then we really prefer you to apply for the different services within that one application. So you can combine it. As of the max budget for travel and service costs, I cannot answer that because there's such a wide variety. So far, we haven't had any cases where it's been a problem to cover the travel expenses for people. We've also had people from very far afield accessing services, but I cannot speak that generally about what the different budget requirements are. For the service costs, here also there's a huge variety of costs associated with the different TA projects, depending on what the equipment is that you need. Some of these technologies are very expensive. Some of the projects also require more time than others. And so you can have anything in the range from maybe a few thousand euros up to tens of thousands euros. It depends. But that is something it's really good if the applicant is mindful and aware of the associated costs. And this is something that in the application form, we ask you to specify how many units of access you are applying for. And that might not mean anything to you right now, because what is a unit of access? And that's the point, because this will prompt you to ask the access manager how it works at their site. Because, now we're getting really into the nitty-gritty of cost calculations, which is not what you need to worry about. But just to give you a very summarized answer, there is a way for us to, we need to quantify the access and the costs that is related to that. And for some services, it will, for example, be for each day and each user. That is one user day is a unit. And so if you're staying there for 7 days, you're requesting 7 units because it's 7 user days. But in other cases, this unit can be a very different metric. So that's just something that you will check with the access manager, and then they can also let you know roughly what the associated costs are. But it's not something you need to worry about when you apply. Okay, I hope that clarified things without confusing more.
Yes, thank you.
So now we have Grishma from India, and you've already contacted one of the access managers from the listed instructions. There is no special selection criteria for applicants from non-European countries. This is just a managerial thing. So we have 20% of the budget allocated for people outside of Europe, but you don't have to concern about this at all. So there's no distinction. You're all being evaluated as researchers independently of where you come from, Grishma. I hope that clarifies. And then you have Leonardo Bruni. Can I theoretically apply for a TA first, asking for fish experimental farming, and a later stage apply for a new TA for some specific analysis omics? It's always best, Stella can answer this briefly, but it's always best to apply for everything that you want to do as a first thing, because then you get penalized as a second time applicant. But you can always apply, and we've had people that have applied for one project and then a second project for other experiments later, and they were successfully funded. So Stella, I don't know if you want to add anything else.
No, I think my answers are also too long, so I'm happy that you
Right.
answered that.
No, it's just I'm trying to get to everyone now.
No, you're right. Just maybe to quickly add, if because there was a question as well in the pre-submitted questions whether you can start a project, let's say 6 months later after it being funded. Yes, you can. So in the context of this question, if you already know you will need that analysis, it's better to already apply for it. If your worry is, but I won't need it until much later, then that is fine. Yes.
So before then we have Jan and Julia, and we also have so before we move on, I would like to, because there's a question, comment or a question here on the EMBRC, the exceptional rules. Basically, we have some in some infrastructures. For example, in the case of Spain, you have EMBRC Spain, and this means that people from Spain can actually apply to EMBRC Spain. In the case of EMBRC PT, EMBRC Italy, EMBRC, I think Sweden. So there are some exceptional rules to this transnational access, because these infrastructures are considered a kind of UN type of entity, in which case people from those countries can actually apply to use those services within the same country, but it's as if they're transnational, they're accessing an infrastructure at European level. So moving on, I hope that clarifies your question, Begonia. So now we have Jan already asked a few questions, so we'll move on to Julia before we move back on to you, Jan, if that's okay. Stella?
Thank you very much. I'm affiliated with a small startup company. So could you please talk further about the open access requirements for the data? Because there are perhaps a few things we would like to keep proprietary, and I'd just like to know before applying.
Yes, so the principle is here that the data should be as open as possible, but what's the exact wording? As limited as necessary or as close as necessary. So, and especially in the case of companies of industrial users, we know that the requirements are a bit different here. And this is something that you can outline and should outline, and then the data management team will work with you on that. So you are not required to make everything open if if it's then detrimental in terms of competition, etc. You will also be asked if there is an IP resulting from this project, for example. So that's something that will be considered.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Maybe first a question from Leonardo, because mine is based on it in the chat.
Well, that question we already had, unless Leonardo submitted two, but this was the one about whether he can first apply for one part of the project and then later for additional services.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. Are there any agreements between the research institutions about transferring samples? I think that's very specific, right? Research institution wise. So like, for example, Nagoya and all that. Because if you want to work at one institution on your samples and then take them to another institution to do further analysis, then they have to have some kind of agreement.
And that's a very good question.
I don't know if you know, but I know that it will depend on each institution, because you have the Nagoyan principles, so you have this overall, but then you have the national laws as well. So that will depend also on the site specific things that's why you really need to talk to the access officer. There's no specific agreements between institutions within Aquaserve, but we have that possibility. But then you will have to talk to the access officer, because obviously there are restrictions depending on what sort of work that you're doing. Sorry,
Yeah,
I don't
this
know.
process is
Exactly.
extremely complex, so that's why I'm asking if there are any other.
But you wouldn't have to deal with that. That would have to be a question from the access officers then getting into contact with each other to make
Yeah.
sure that you know it wouldn't be on you to do that, okay? Because that would depend, as I said, in international law, but also national law. So sometimes it's beyond that, okay? Because of the problems of the invasive species or contaminations with the labs, it really depends.
Yeah.
But Stella, if you want to add anything.
No, I think that's spot on. The access managers do talk with each other and they work together, but then there are these specific cases that Anna just talked about.
But then this is something that we also ask for the proposals if you have any ethical issues, and we do have an ethics committee that we work with when doing the evaluations. We don't often refer to that, but there's an ethics committee that also oversees all the evaluations in case there are problems or that there are difficulties that they will advise us. And these are people that are very involved in all these protocols.
Yeah, it's just that this takes at least a year. So I have this process right now going on still since over a year. So it's not, I mean, I think regarding Aquasurf, it's super easy to have the TA institutions, whatever, and switch from one to the other. But to actually take the samples legally to the other institution is a completely different story. And I
Yeah.
thought there's maybe something, but of course,
We don't have
it's
pre-agreements because it will depend on each. I mean, we didn't
yeah,
make a pre-agreement, but it will depend on. It's a project-based
of course.
decision, right? So, but that doesn't mean that if you have a necessity to do that, that the access officer will not work towards that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? So we are really on time. Thank you all very much for participating. If you have any feedback for us to improve these sessions for you, these are made for you. And we will have another session on the 25th of March. On the 25th of March, just before the deadline. If you feel that you would like to have some of the access providers here, please let us register and let us know. Perhaps we could invite some of them if you have specific questions for them. Please register and let us know in advance. We will send you an email with the summary from this meeting, presentation. So I've put all the links on the chat for all the relevant pages that we were mentioning during the presentation, and we will also send you the link to the next session in case you wish to register. Thank you so much, Stella.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for the questions and for showing up.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye bye.